Hey guys, my name is Kaylee Coleman, and today I'll be delivering a speech about genetics and how it has evolved. I've always found genetics interesting. I loved it in high school. I liked being able to figure out why I had red hair and blue eyes and why my friends might have had brown hair or blonde hair. Our lives have all been greatly influenced by genetics, whether we realize it or not. From seeing the traits that our children will have to creating hybrid plants for a better crop yield. Genetics today has become a very popular topic to teach in schools and talk about in everyday life. Knowing a lot about genetics can be very useful. Genetics is defined as the study of heredity and variation of inherited characteristics. In 1858, Charles Darwin came up with his theory of natural selection. We know this today as survival of the fittest, and it is applied to much of our everyday lives, like sports and other competitions. Charles Darwin came up with his theory of natural selection by studying similar species in the Galapagos Islands in Ecuador. He would watch how similar species would compete in nature and how certain species were just better equipped for nature than others. Next up is Gregor Mendel. Many of us hated to hear this name in high school because we just could not wrap our minds around what Gregor Mendel was coming up with and what he discovered. Gregor Mendel was an Austrian monk who did work with pea plants. He wanted to figure out exactly why two purple plants could be bred and make a white plant. So he crossbred plants of the same species to see what the different outcomes would be. He came up with this thing called a Punnett square. Punnett squares take the traits of two characteristics and cross them to see which traits will show up, the dominant or the recessive. We still use Punnett squares today to determine which traits will show up whenever two organisms are crossed. In 1953, the double helix of DNA was modeled by our next favorite group in the evolution of genetics, Watson and Crick. Watson and Crick used their friend's high-powered microscope to actually be able to see the double helix model in DNA. We thank them for discovering what our genes look like. Genetics has also helped our pharmaceutical industry in a huge way. Bacteria have DNA too, and to make a medicine, we have to know the genes that the bacteria have to be able to duplicate and replicate it so that we can denature it and turn it into something that can be extremely beneficial. Genetics has also contributed to a number of discoveries that have just been absolutely monumental in history. For example, Dolly the sheep. Dolly was the first fully genetically identical clone of a mammal. Dolly was cloned from a mammary gland cell of a sheep, and she was named after the singer Dolly Parton. The birth of Dolly the sheep proved that specialized cells could be used to create an exact genetic copy of the animal that they came from. This has proved to be so important. Because of this finding, we can now use stem cells to clone whole organs and create a bright horizon for the future of organ transplants, and maybe shorten the list to wait for an organ just a little. Genetics is just so important and so world-changing and has made so much of our lives so much easier. From creating better crop yields with plants and helping the pharmaceutical industry and creating organ clones, genetics has just been so great. I personally find genetics so interesting, and I hope you have too.